Flickers of gold dancing across the water, the rising sun marking a new day in the Florida Keys.
If you look up right now, I mean, you couldn't tell anything was wrong. It's, Mother Nature at its finest.
She was not so kind weeks ago, anything but when Hurricane Irma came barreling through, leaving behind a paradise broken, the pieces piled high on the sides of roads and in front of homes now unlivable, at least for the time being. A look back up at the sky and another sight to behold, this time a plane landing at the Marathon Airport. On board volunteers hoping to put those pieces back together.
When something like this happens, I mean, it's our time to step up and be there for people.
How you doing, Emily?
These men are firefighters from Sarasota up through the Bay Area, flying down on their days off.
Yeah, they'll bring in 5, 6 at a time. Those guys will work for 24, 48 hours, and then off they go. And we keep it rotating. We've got a constant revolving door of guys coming in and out.
Driving from key to key, it's clear the team has their work cut out for them. Led by Monroe County firefighter David Reeves, they stop at this home on Falcon Lane.
Let's take a look. I understand we've got some mold issues here.
And with that, they get down to it. Wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow, full of debris, still washing up from the canal during high tide. Homeowner Gregory Salvechis can't sit still, even with a bandaged foot, infected after he stepped on a nail while trying to clean up by himself. The 78-year-old says he isn't used to being on this end of things.
I used to be the handyman for the whole neighborhood. Yeah. Everybody, something needs it. Gregory has it.
Take that whole piece, Chris.
Now these younger guys, as Gregory calls them, are taking over.
Get it up.
While the volunteers keep working, I want to take a moment to show you one of the major issues they keep running into. Take a look at the wall over here. This is the water line, easily 4 feet tall, and while this side of the wall looks relatively good, you can bet there's mold on the other side, meaning it's all gotta go.
As soon as we pull it down, this is what's inside the wall. So obviously you see how black and how it's been growing for the last 3 weeks.
Gregory's wife Dolores looks on as the drywall and much of the ceiling is carted away.
I just want to cry. It's a disaster.
Every single house that we go to, that's exactly what happens. It's overwhelming to the point where people are ready to completely walk away from this life and not return. And if we can go to one of those homes and say, give me 4 hours and let me change your attitude in 4 hours.
That's the time it takes for these firefighters to turn a life around.
I want to thank you guys so much. You are fantastic. You are great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We got you.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Me and my wife.
Yes, sir.
We've been here, 23 years and never seen anything like you guys done.
To be able to pick someone up, after they've been turned on their ear.
Very much.
Thank you for being a good man to our community. That's how we keep going. If you need anything else, you call me. Okay?
I appreciate it.
All right.
Leaving one house and on to the next. Plenty more to be done before the sun paints the sky again. This time marking the end of the day in a paradise not so broken after all. In the Florida Keys, Kate McVeigh, Spectrum News.
Every chance I get, I'm riding.
I think it's in me. When I'm out here, I'm free.
Most days, they're city slickers, but give them some boots, buckles, and stirrups, and they're bucking stereotypes of what a traditional cowboy looks, acts, and sounds like.
Oh my God, I've been riding horses since I was knee-high to a duck.
Growing up in the country, Kerry White Sr. was introduced to wrangling and riding by working on a farm.
You got to look back on your heritage. You got to look back on your history and realize that whatever's in you, it's going to come out of you. That's where it comes from.
Determined to share their love for horses and the history of black cowboys with the community, a group was formed. They call themselves Cowbros.
It means a lot to me to have the camaraderie that I have with the other black cowboys.
As the posse rides at JM Farms in Plant City, the Cowbros feel right at home.
And see, the misconception is that there are no black cowboys or African-American cowboys. There are cowboys of all colors.
History backs them up. Researchers say some of the earliest cowboys in Florida were black.
If you go back and look at your history, you know, cowboys were your blacks, Hispanics. They were considered as your cowboys. And, you know, the Caucasians was necessarily considered as your cattlemen.
Like those cowboys before them, they do traditional chores like cow herding, sorting, and exercising the horses.
What I love about this one? This is my baby here. Her name is Brickhouse. I had her now for 10 years.
The men say the horses are a lot more than just animals to them. They also become like family.
My wife has actually said that you're going to have to make a choice between me or the horses, and I said, see you.
And it's the respect that the animal brings to the table. It's the love that the horse demands in exchange. It's just respect.
History anchors them, the bonds unbreakable.
As long as I'm of sound mind and body, I will have a horse. I will be on a horse.
I'll be riding horses till I die.
In Hillsborough County, Lori Davison, Spectrum, Bay News 9.
Be a nuisance where it counts. Do your part to inform and stimulate the public to join your action.
Just outside of the high school that bears her name hang the words of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Be depressed, discouraged, and disappointed at failure and the disheartening effects of ignorance, greed, corruption, and bad politics. But never give up.
For these students, the quote has taken on new meaning.
It does, and it inspires me every day when I walk into that school. It makes me feel so proud.
But to understand why, we have to take a step back in time and learn a bit more about Douglas.
She was tiny with these large oversized hats, but believe me, as her lore and reputation grew, you as a politician or office holder didn't want to have to be confronted with her. She came here in 1915.
Dr. Paul George, a historian at History Miami, saw Douglas speak once, about 10 or so years before her death in 1998.
She was involved in many women's causes, and she had this really adventuresome life, but also a life that was meaningful.
Douglas moved to Miami in 1915, eventually settling into this Coconut Grove cottage. George says it's where the activist did much of her work, most notably the book The Everglades, River of Grass. Preserving the Everglades, says George, was a cause Douglas took up later in life, long after her time advocating for both women's and civil rights.
She was very outspoken, she was articulate, just very strong opinions, but she could always back them up with information.
Dr. George calls Marjorie Stoneman Douglas ahead of her time, an unexpected force to be reckoned with. And the same could be said about the students, survivors, right here in Parkland.
I just remember at 225, my life changed forever. It was surreal. It was like I didn't believe what was happening. And then after a few days, it finally hit me that 17 people died at my school.
Since then, students like Adam Buchwald and Zach Hibsham have been channeling their grief into a movement that is now sweeping the nation.
Any kid under 18 can't vote.
The two best friends even designed their own campaign called Parents Promise to Kids.
We want the politicians to hear our voices. With this contract, we're giving children a voice.
So far, the teens say more than 1,200 adults have signed their contract, a promise to vote for candidates supporting gun control on behalf of their children. Do you think the lawmakers are taking notice now?
They better be shaking in their boots because we're coming after them.
It's a familiar fighting spirit now that you know more about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
She's still with us. She would be with us every step of the way.
Perhaps in her signature glasses and oversized hat, encouraging students to be a nuisance where it counts, and most importantly, to never give up. In Parkland, Kate McVeigh, Spectrum, Bay News 9.